This past week, Cosmo from Bungie went on Twitter to send out a tweet saying, "Give me all of the things you want to see Bungie add to Destiny 2. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days, and I just wrote a whole lot of stuff down, and I wanted to make a video about it, but I wanted to make sure I got everything out of my mind that I think if I wanted to make Destiny change, update, whatever you want to call it, what is every single thing that I would like to see them do to make this game the best version it can be." Now, that being said, some of the stuff I don't have on this list because they are already coming in final shape, so I don't want to, add that. Obviously, they're adding it. I wanted to think of a bunch of stuff that wasn't addressed and wasn't getting added to this game. Now, I want to preface this off the top and let you know this is a big list. Most of the stuff I know would never happen, but if there was, if we had an infinite amount of system space, if there was no hindrances on the engine, what would I like to see Destiny 2 encompass and have? If you want to sit back and listen to it, be my guest, but here are a lot of things that I want to walk through, some big, some small, that I would love to see addressed, added, updated, removed, changed, all these things to make my day-to-day experience in Destiny better. The first thing that I want to add is extensive character customizations. As we always talk about, fashion is a true endgame in Destiny, and it boggles my mind, especially as we start becoming more connected, to other races in the world, whether it be Fallen or Cabal. I'm more surprised that we are not able to start donning parts of their armor and parts of their gear to look more like them. And I would love to see that added on top of more character customizations like beards, more hairstyles, more facial options, more body composition options, just allowing players to truly dive into their character and make it theirs. That is something that you gotta have, and I would love to see that on a much larger scale. If you're a big fan of Cabal, especially with us and our connection to Cabal, and you wouldn't wear a bunch of stuff that kind of makes you similar to Cabal, go ham. Same for Fallen, whatever, do it. Next up, and this is the one that I saw a lot of people mention in my chat and in response to Cosmo, and that is the ping system. Especially because someone like myself who spends a lot of time teaching players, having a ping system that allows me to put something on their screen so they know what I'm talking about would be beneficial. In a day one raid, a ping system is beneficial. In a Grandmaster, ping system is beneficial. If you played Fortnite, you know what a ping system is. If you played Overwatch, you know what a ping system is. Ping system, bring it to Destiny. Everyone would love it, and we would be better off with it in the game. The next thing I want to add is world planets vendor targeting loot. Also included in this are dungeon-esque world bosses, similar to Escalation Protocol, that offers loot and cosmetics tied to that planet. As we know, with sunsetting being removed and all those sunset gear coming back, this is a really nice and quick and easy way for us to flush each world with reasons to go back to those worlds and do those lost sectors, farm those lost sectors, maybe even, especially with them having legend and master versions now. Giving them all, of course, refreshed perk pools is also going to be very beneficial, but just giving each planet a reason to visit them, and also being able to fight bosses on the level of a dungeon boss, maybe even a raid boss on some of the more difficult planets, especially for players who might not be able to do a dungeon because they don't have a team yet, or a raid. They get to experience something with just people in the world, especially close to them, and just giving players steps of experiencing even just a dungeon-esque boss would be huge. The next thing is a huge thing that I think everyone would agree on, and that is letting all content, especially PvE content, be farmable 24/7. It is way past time of the whole waiting until Tuesday's reset to go try for your exotics or your drops again. No matter whether it is new or old, especially if it's old, get rid of all of those walls. It is way past time. That is a old, outdated system that just doesn't work anymore and forces player progression on a timetable that is not, beneficial to the player. Let players decide when their time is up playing or going for, a drop. Sure, if you really want it, let reset have drops that are tied to a higher drop chance or something like that. So reset actually kind of matters for the overall world, but get rid of it. If a player wants to spend from Tuesday to Thursday farming one, activity non-stop for maybe whatever reason, no matter what the content is, whether it's a raid, whether it's a dungeon or an exotic mission, let them. Next up, I have another one I think everyone's going to agree on, and that is any raid that's not in the game, bring it back. That includes Scourge of the Past, Crown of Sorrow, all of the Leviathans. Bring them all back out of the DCV. Bring all their cosmetics, all their prestige cosmetics, all their emblems, the difficulty levels. Bring everything back. There's more people, in my opinion, that have not experienced those raids than people who have and still play this game. So in my mind, there's more people who haven't experienced these raids than people who have experienced these raids. They've heard about them, they've heard about how fantastic they are or how fun they are, and it's time to make those raids available for everyone. Next up, I have another bringing back of all the things, and this one's going to be bringing back all of the stories and using them for the New Light system. That includes the Red War campaign, Curse for Cyrus, Warmind, Forsaken. Take all those systems, all those stories, and bring them back. Of course, everyone wants to experience them, but tie in the New Light system to introduce players to all aspects of the game, including how to deal with champions, different burns, different modifiers, so players have a way to go into the game and they know the story, but they also know how different aspects of the systems work. Too many times that we see people jump back into the game and don't know what the artifact system does. They don't know if champions, they have to bring this stuff to deal with champions. They don't know what certain modifiers do on nightfalls. Use your old campaigns as a foundation for teaching players how to get brought up to speed with the game, but also teaching them about the lore and the history and how we got to where we are in the game as well. Can't make it mandatory, but allow players to progress at their own pace, but don't make it mandatory where they have to do all this stuff first before they can do any of the new current content. Allow them to have a way to, dive right into the new content, but allow them to do the old campaigns and learn how these systems on the game work at their own time. Next up, I have one that I think has been near and dear to my heart for a long time. My chat has heard me talk about it a lot, and that is create chaseable cosmetics for true in-game activities. Of course, to me, that means giving players thematic and extravagant or outlandish or even gaudy armor or weapons that clearly can tell the story of where they earned it from. Now, if fashion is a true endgame, then we need to make it actually mean something in endgame. Tie the challenges or feats from doing Grandmasters or Master Raids or, Trials of Osiris, Lighthouse visits or something. But if I am a Master Raider, then I should be able to show off how absolutely gaudy my armor is in some way, shape, or form, or allow me to have prestiged weapons or something. Whatever it needs to be to make sense, do it. But there's not much difference between a person that only does Crota once and someone who's done flawlesses and all this other stuff in it. It doesn't need to be weapons, and I think that's the issue. A lot of times people think it needs to be certain versions of weapons or armor, but there's only so much you can do with weapons and armor. What you can do that doesn't make too big of an issue for like the day-to-day weapon gameplay, but still make it matter, is make the fashion different. Make the fashion that a true endgame player of certain content has be different from a player who is either just getting into it or doesn't have as much skill or experience in that content yet. What that does is that doesn't stop them from being able to participate in that content, but that does give them aspirational goals or content to go towards to want to get as good as or experience as to earn that look. And looks are always going to be really, really cool. You don't have to be jealous, but you can respect and be like, man, that person put in the time and the effort and the work and they look fantastic. I might not like that fashion, but man, that fashion you can't get anywhere else but that content. Next up, I think we need to change seals. Making seals rare and making them matter again is a big thing to me. Now, obviously, every season we have new and like updated gilded seals, but it's time to make certain seals rare, difficult, challenging, and matter when you earn them. On top of that, it's time to give seals cosmetics for prestiging them or gilding them, or other long form challenges that keeps you in that content longer than say 3 weeks. Now you can take it for what it is. Cosmetics are always going to be the best thing for gilding and prestiging besides a number and all that stuff, but long-term goals and aspirational content is huge for me. So giving hardcore in-game players some long-term goals to like progress towards will always be a W in my book. Next up, and this is kind of a twofold thing for me. First up, I think we need to add Forge mode. Forge mode is just a system that allows players to create their own things, community-based maps that the players create and then toss into a social unranked mode where people can play them and try them out and then vote on them. And then sometimes Bungie can use them and then flush them into the game and just giving players more things to do. Forge mode is always going to be fantastic for a PvP, but also a PvE standpoint for some fun PvE type of content. Never seen a game not have a Forge mode that didn't succeed very well. If you cannot make a lot of content continually, let the players make it for you. The other half of that, next up, is a theater / photo / cinematic mode. A lot of times, especially for those capture artists that are in the community, having a way to just take photos, especially at the end of a raid, is always going to be really cool. Having a way to go into theater mode for those that want to make videos, cinematic mode for folks that just want to experience just the beautiful landscape of Destiny. Giving players a way to do that would be huge in more ways than I think they realize. Next up, I have a thing that I think we've talked about a lot, but bringing back seasonal 3 and 6 player activities like Sundial and Menagerie and tossing them into a legacy playlist for players to interact and play with on their own time. Doing this allows players to experience a lot of these old activities that people think so highly about, especially some of the other ones that they might not think as highly of, but adding them all together can make for a very fun system of going in and playing those activities that players may not have been able to been around to experience. In doing so is also really, really good to allow players to spend time in those activities while being able to target farm loot from those activities that are sunset. I'm not talking about going for patterns. I'm talking about target farming, especially like with Sundial and Menagerie, into weapons that they want to go for that were sunset that are now coming back and being moved forward. Putting this in, of course, the legacy playlist allows players to know where they are going, where they need to go to experience it, and just letting them sit in the activity, playing it over and over and over until they don't want to play anymore or until they've earned all of the gear that they currently want to earn. Once again, letting the player decide when it's time to stop playing. Next up, it's very simple. Bring back Wrath of the Machine. It's the one raid that everyone wants and have talked about for years, and it's time for it to come back. Bring back Wrath. No need to add anything else. Next up, another one, bringing back the community events, Niobe Labs and Corridors of Time. I do not think it's, missed on anyone that those two activities are very highly sought after in this current day, but both Niobe Labs and Corridors of Times were quite a time and experience for the community that everyone needs to be able to experience no matter when they decide to join our community. Next up, this kind of falls right on the heels of my last point with Niobe Labs and Corridors of Time, and that is making community events actually involve the whole community. Of course, we talk about, the almighty thing. We talk about when we were able to do the whole ARG with Rise of Iron, and the one, falling back issue with Niobe Labs and Corridors of Time that a lot of people felt at the time was that even though this was a great community event, unless you were tied in with streamers, you weren't really a part of the community event. So if there was a way that they can bring back Niobe Labs and Corridors of Time, but figure out a way to make the overall community have some influence on it so they can, reap the benefits and feel, involved in the changing of the world with unlocking content, that would be huge. My one down, issue that I always say about Niobe Labs and Corridors of Time was unless you were in those Discord chats or unless you were a pretty prominent streamer at the time connecting your communities, you were just sitting back watching, waiting for the streamers and the YouTubers to unlock it for you. So if there's a way they can, balance the whole community that streams and covers content and the community that just plays, that would be great. Keeping up the whole trend of community-based things, creating exotic missions that the community has to find instead of looking at a roadmap for. My biggest takeaway always is with Whisper of the Worm and Shadow Throne. Both of those were things that the community, for the most part, found, and it kind of blew up like wildfire before the full community started really looking into it and trying to figure it out. And those were the two things that I think they did really, really well that we need to see more of in the future. It could be for unlocking dungeons. It could be for unlocking exotic missions. Those are things that the community will always remember. It's one of those I was there to help unlock this content type of thing. And if they can add that for all the exotics in the future, instead of telling us that they're coming back, instead of telling us that they're on the roadmap, just let the community find it. That'd be a great update. Next up, for me, it is a big one, and I would love to see them figure out a way to tie secrets behind a part of the API that players cannot see beforehand. If you can figure out a way to not unlock it until, say the first person completes a mission or something, that'd be great. But secrets are missing in this game, and ways of bringing secrets back are, making it community based, but also locking down your API a bit to where people don't know all these steps. People don't know where the locations are and all this stuff before the mission has even dropped. And it would be really nice for them to figure out a way to, make that stuff unlock at a later date, instead of people knowing the moment an update drops, hey, this exotic is coming, it's going to be coming from this mission, from this location, be ready. Next up, we're going to talk about shaders and stuff, and that is a huge thing for me, but they need to figure out a way to add a search bar to type in the name of shaders and find them. Now, of course, you can favorite them right now, but with so many shaders, sometimes it's hard to find shaders on the fly. So if I can just type in the name, the first couple of letters, and it starts sorting them out and showing me those shaders instantly, that would be huge, just to add more customization. Because honestly, I'm not going to be changing my shader often, not because I don't want to, but because I don't want to sit there trying to find something that someone suggested to me to go find. Next up, this is a very simple one, and I think everyone probably is going to agree with this. Unlimited transmog. Get rid of the whole synth weave system. Allow players just to transmog to their heart's content and just be able to play more freely with changing the way they look and their characters' appearance infinitely. Tying into that, we want to talk about the loadouts. Allowing the customization of names of loadouts would be huge. Sometimes I have certain loadouts for low man raids, for day one raids, for grandmasters, for farming. Allow me to just have a farming name, raid 1, a DPS raid, ad clear raid. Just giving me a way to open up my loadouts and just look at the name real quick is way easier than me trying to remember what symbol and color I had to add to this. A big one for me, and I think for a lot of in-game players, is a weapons test dummy / firing range, all those things together. Allow me to, not even the tribute hall, but something on a much larger scale, go into an area and just do a whole lot of testing of different weapons and different weapon values in certain scenarios. Let me test all my stuff on red bars, yellow bars, majors, minors, ultras, bosses with these prerequisites, bosses with these prerequisites. Allow me to shoot a sniper from 10 to 50 meters away, or certain weapons. Allow me to go very in depth with a lot of my stuff. Give that little DPS tracker that Division has, for example. Allow me to go really in depth with my builds and testing to know how beneficial it is and what's going to be useful where. Next up is SRL. Most people have never played SRL, and that is a shame. Now, I know a lot of people at one point in time said SRL was never coming back, but this is my list, and I think SRL deserves to come back. We need more things in the game that aren't just super sweaty, but that can be, that allows players to have fun. And SRL would be a very, very nice thing, especially now that we're getting more ways to move around. There's not just sparrows now we have skimmers. You can have different races with different, versions like Mario Kart has. You can have a sparrow version, then a skimmer version. I saw someone even mention a grapple version. I don't know how that's going to work, but let us have it. Let us see if this is something worth it. But at the foundation, SRL needs to come back. Next up, I don't think anyone's going to have too much issue with this, especially since it happens on wipe screens. And that is allowing players to see at the end of encounters damage reports, just like in a wipe. I think sometimes we get too caught up in the numbers, but of course they show us the damage numbers when we wipe. They may as well show us the damage numbers when we succeed, so we know what actually worked, what things people were using that were, helped us get the clear on this encounter, especially because it happens anyway on wipes. Next up on the list is exotic transmog. I know how they feel about this, but I still think, allowing full customization and agency over my character is being limited currently by the inability to transmog, exotics. I understand it with weapons, but at the bare minimum, armor should be able to be useful and just change just like the rest of my armor. Next up, of course, we talked about this earlier, but I still think it's, good to reissue it. Give players a reason to go to a planet continually after it's no longer the current active planet in a seasonal story. This one's huge because we always talk about how there's no reason to go to a planet after you've done the campaign and done its one seasonal activity. But adding world bosses, adding of course a lot of vendor refreshes and targeted loot in each world is something that could be very beneficial. But at the bare minimum, giving players a reason to keep going back to planets and doing things there is huge. Next up on the list, now if you played Division or Borderlands, stick with me, that is going to be weapon merging. Weapon merging is a simple thing that you can go to a vendor and you can merge two weapons into one. Now, in order to do that, you have to spend a bunch of currency, obviously, but say for example, you have a weapon and it has almost everything you want in it except for one perk. Well, if you have another weapon that has that one perk, you can then destroy that weapon and use it to take that perk and add it into the other perk. and then override that perk that you don't need. And now you have the weapon that you've been grinding so hard for. You know, too many times we talk about getting a 4 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5 or a 5 out of 6. And we've been farming and farming, and all you need is just that one perk. But you can't keep that, you know, great roll because it's missing that one perk. Well, with weapon merging, you would be able to go to a vendor and then obviously make that thing happen by just going in, spending a bunch of currency and merging two weapons and merging that one perk onto the other weapon. And now you have your perfect roll. Now, of course, it can only be done so many times, but this would be huge, and respecting players' time even more is always a great thing in my mind. And I can't tell you how many times I've deleted a weapon only because it was missing one perk, and I've gotten that perk on another weapon. So being able to like merge this stuff together would make my time not as wasted at times. Next up on the list is giving dungeon refresh perks more often when new perks are added to the game. Also, updating the dungeons with multiple difficulties and emblems as new difficulties are added to the game. This is very simple. Sometimes when a dungeon comes out, it gets a lot of love, but after, you know, it's no longer the new hot thing, it starts losing support, especially as the years come, you know, go on. It would be nice to see those dungeons get constant, you know, perk refreshes while everything else is getting perks as well, so people can go back and farm the new stuff. You know, you can also use weapon merging to make that a lot easier on you, but allowing players to have respected time and also giving them a reason to go back into those dungeons year over year and earning new stuff, maybe new emblems, doing new content, doing new challenges in that content is also going to be a super big beneficial thing to the livelihood of those dungeons as the years go on. Next up, we have vendor armor rerolling. As we get more armor, as different stats increase and decrease in value like resilience and intellect, we should be able to go to a vendor as the years goes on, spend currencies to move my stats to a new location. Now, I'm not saying that you can reroll for a new stat like values, like overall, like you can't turn a 65 into a 70, but you keep that stat total and you're able to reroll the distribution of that over and over. Say, for example, we're in a recovery intellect meta and all your armor is recovery intellect. Either you can go out and refarm everything when it changes to discipline and resilience, or you can spend some time as well going to a vendor and re-rolling it instead of forcing you to have to farm armor all over again just because stats are different. Next up, this might be a controversial one, but that is making Onslaught and Pantheon the PvE baseline and ceiling for difficulty moving forward in the world of D2. Now, as the making of this video, Pantheon is not out. When I mean Pantheon, I mean like the N8 boss version of it with the content mode and all that stuff, and making it really difficult and making it like a pinnacle activity as far as difficulty. On the other side of that, Legend isn't, you know, Onslaught Legend isn't very hard until you get to like waves 30 and 40, but even the same can be said for a normal Onslaught. And because of that, I think Onslaught is a very good foundation for the overall PvE world's difficulty barrier, or I guess baseline. And using that is also going to be a really good thing because it gives players more used to fighting in more difficult content. So when they go into the harder stuff, they're not overwhelmed as easily. Speaking of Onslaught, next up I have do not let Onslaught lose support and updates ever. Onslaught is one of the best things that have ever been added to Destiny in a very long time, and it would be a huge detriment to the game if it ever decides to lose support and lose constant updates and like refreshes to its, you know, game mode. It would be very sad if Onslaught dies like Gambit. I would be very sad, and I really do not think it should ever not be a focal point for the devs to constantly want to update. Creating a endless Onslaught mode with leaderboards. This would be very, 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 very beneficial to the team because people love leaderboards. They like their, they like to see their names up places, and it'd be really cool to see just how far a player can go or a team can go, and how far they can go as far as like getting up in the leaderboard and seeing how well that goes. Obviously, you would want to reset it every season, but also spend that season to add new stuff into Onslaught so it doesn't become too dry. But it'd be very fantastic to see Onslaught get a leaderboard mode with endless mode as well. Next up on the list is creating a sandbox team, if they don't already have one, that actually continually listens to the people who play PvP and has a sole focus on updating month over month, season over season, the sandbox, and keeping it fresh for those players who are actively playing it. Now, I don't want to forget about my PvPers because there's a lot of them out there, and creating a system that allows people to, different skill levels to want to play is huge. Next up, and this isn't really big, but a lot of people are asking about it because I have it, and that is bringing back kill trackers and trackers of activities and feats of player experiences back to Ghosts. Back in the day, way back in the day, when the Leviathan first came out, there was a ghost that came with it called the Contender Shell. And that Contender Shell, when you pulled it out, it simply told you how many activities you had done of that raid. This is really cool because it was a way for people to show off in the world how many times they had done this raid and the encounters in the raid, and it would be nice to show that. They also had a thing way back in the day where you can see the kill tracker from PvE and PvP as well on a ghost. I know we moved away from that stuff from kill trackers, but it would be nice. I know they kind of moved trackers to the emblem, but trackers on the ghosts is something that more people are probably going to see, and it's just a cool little nice touch. Next up is the Clan HQ and Hub World. In this area, all the clan can be there, and all of their experiences can be there both individually and collectively. Of course, you'll have clan achievements, clan history, clan leaderboards, all those things, and unlocking cosmetics through the clan would also be really cool. If your clan has a bunch of world's first raids, you can have that flexed in there as well. Just things that makes you feel like your clan actually matters outside of just having a small little banner that doesn't even get updated anymore. I'm really surprised that banner wasn't used in PvP as well back in the day when you could have a flag that was planted into the ground. Same thing for rally flags. You should be able to place a rally flag and it shows your clan's emblem. Give us a clan hub world. Next up is one that I know would probably never happen, but would be really, really cool to experience, and that is a legacy raid experience. What this would allow people to do would allow them to experience raids as they were first completed when the raid was first released. For example, you would be able to go back and do a Leviathan raid with double primaries, with your rockets were in the heavy slot, for example, or back with Forsaken when you were like very underleveled and you could do all these other stuff. Just to experience it would be really, really cool. Now, of course, trackers and scores and drops and all that would be disabled. Nothing would drop, no XP or nothing. Simply put, you can go into this content using, say the 20 most used weapons in that activity, and just being able to experience what it was like to be doing that raid at that time from 2017 to 2020 or 2024. Next up, it is simple facial hair and more customizations. I know I talked about this earlier, but I wanted to just specifically hone in on facial hair. I think facial hair, because we want to look at our customization even more. Facial hair is something that people have asked for a long time, so I want to make sure I shout that out specifically. Give players beards. Everybody wants beards. Give them beards. Next up for me is going to be unlocking matchmaking for all content PvE based. That includes Grandmaster Nightfalls and Master Raids. I know everyone talks about how dumb the community can like be in matchmaking content, but it's time for us to like, you know, take off the training wheels and let the player experience and, you know, try to get it done. If you're, you know, a Final Fantasy player, if you're a World of Warcraft player, if you play some other stuff like Division, then in those games, a lot of that content is match made. And even though there might be a high failure rate sometimes, they still can match make it. You just shouldn't have to only use Fireteam Finder. That should be a way to have a more competent team get in there. But since there's already a pretty high failure rate in Grandmasters and Master Raids, I don't see it changing too much if all of a sudden you get matchmaking in those raids. Next up, we should have gear set bonuses and just gear sets to flesh out certain playstyles or even bring out new playstyles outside of exotics. Now I know currently exotics are one of the only ways to, you know, make big changes to playstyles, but it would be nice to see, you know, gear sets, maybe something in the middle of between, you know, legendary purples and exotics, giving us a way to like say having a gear set from Cabal or Hive or Fallen that does some cool things that are very niche, but if you build into that, you know, play style, is very beneficial. Gear sets are always a cool thing to add, and it gives you some other way to play the game besides just exotic armor, exotic weapon. Next up, it's going to be giving players more action sack, fun, silly modes in the game. Best way I can think of it is thinking of something like Infection or Blitzball in Halo, just somewhere to go and just have a good old laughing time where, you know, the kills don't really matter, but it's all in fun and games. I know Mayhem is kind of like that, but I would love to see more and more like unique things like that. You know, they can add some fun stuff with like Pyramid, the Skimmers, of course with Sparrows, bring back Crimson Days, bring back Combined Arms, just some stuff that allows you to just go in and have a fun time and just try out unique things. Next up is one that's kind of similar to the previous one with Clan Hub Worlds, but that is giving players their own housing. If you want to add a housing market as well, cool, but having a house where a player can go to and decorate it and show off their achievements and their history in the game is going to be just something I would love to see the game add. You can have the thing where you invite players to your house. Now I know this is probably the one place where Eververse would go crazy, and I know they would, but I don't think it would be as detrimental as some people might think. Of course, the whales will go insane, but as long as there's enough content to earn and like add to the house long term as well, I think it'll be fine. But there's no negative to adding a house, you know, in Destiny. Next up for me would be player trading. Trading has always been a hot topic, and especially with the drop rates that are in this world, it would be nice if player trading was a thing, especially in this day and age. My one caveat, as I've talked about multiple times with trading and dropping and all that stuff, is that my one rule is that the person that you're giving it to had to have been there in the activity when the weapon or armor piece dropped. That'll keep it, you know, kind of pure. I'm not saying you can sell this stuff, but it gives players, you know, equal chances of getting a drop that you need, but also it gives friends reasons to keep running activities with other friends, even if they already have earned, you know, that exotic or that drop. So again, you have to drop it to the player while in the activity, and the player must have been there when it drops. Kind of keeps it all, you know, pure, but also makes it to where, okay, if I've already got the weapon or the armor, I'm gonna keep running this with my buddy until one of us gets it, and if I get it again before they do, I can just drop it to them and at least they earned it. So I don't feel like I'm wasting my time and they don't feel like they're wasting their time or wasting my time. Next up for me is one that's at this point outdated, and that is getting rid of raid banners. Now that we have social activity that allow you to just walk up to it and place a rally banner without much issue, there's no reason for me to have to go to Hawthorne to buy them anymore. It is just a currency dump, and I know it is a currency dump, but raid banners should just be something that you can just walk up to and activate now. There's no reason for it to be a thing anymore. Just get rid of raid banners, holding up my inventory, and just let me just go into an activity and just let me press X to deposit like a rally flag. Next up is a simple one, and that's letting players vote on PvP maps and PvE strike maps. If the players that are loading in don't want to play that map, they shouldn't be forced to. This is all about player agency and letting players have control over content a little bit more. So if they, those 12 players don't want to play it, let them vote to skip it. These last couple might get me in trouble a little bit, but that's why we left these at the end. If you're one of the people that hear this and see this, make sure you let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching so far. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Next up, we have making the well user hold the well, like in the OG trailer. The big thing that we always talk about is how overpowered Well of Radiance would be, or is, or could be, or should be, or how do you balance well. One thing that I've always felt that well should be is a risk and reward, or like a pro and a con, especially as it overrides a lot of what makes Bubble really good as well. In the original trailer, we saw that when the user with the Forsaken trailer placed the well, they had to hold it the entire time. Obviously, that was just a trailer cinematic, but it is very, very, very interesting that we moved away from that when we got well. So, my thinking is make the well place happen, but then the player has to hold the well to give everyone increased damage resistance and slay recovery. The moment you let the well sword go, you lose that resistance, you lose that recovery, and in exchange you get a damage buff. So one or the other happens. Now I don't know if the damage buff should still be 25% or whatever, but they can talk about that later. But you have to choose whether or not you can increase everyone's damage or increase everyone's defenses. Will this make well not broken anymore? Probably not. But it allows you to have to pick and choose when you place well, when you need the resistance. This might make Bubble a better choice sometimes instead entirely, but I thought it would be really cool for them to balance it around the player either holding it like Bubble or Big Wall and letting it go to have a different effect happen. Next up on our list is an Emote Wheel. An Emote Wheel I think is not going to have too many issues, but Emote Wheels allow us to have even more emotes on our person at all times, and it would be really nice to have just more emotes. I have to swap out too many times, and that's just annoying and frustrating. We should have more options on the fly. Emote Wheel, give us Emote Wheel. Next up, we're going to keep it with the emotes, and that is allowing players to customize their stance in their inventory screen. My thinking is allowing them to use an emote as their inventory screen. I know it might, affect the weapon, but of course you can make it to where they don't hold a weapon at all, and instead they do an emote. Would be really fun. Allows for some more character to come out of their character as far as personality and more customization, so their character feels like their character. So allow me to go into an inventory screen and see some wild emote happen that they want people to see to reflect their personality flowing through their character. Next up, we have bringing back damage buffs and debuff stacking. Now, of course, that means you have to rebalance all your raid bosses, but being able to, efficiently stack buffs with your teammates in the appropriate manner to get high debuffs and buffs to your fire team is a skill that is lost. Everyone knows now it's just one debuff and one buff, but back in the day you could apply multiple buffs to your team where they all just added on top of each other, and then debuffs happen to the enemies and they all stacked on top of each other, and then you could cook. But if you did anything in the wrong order, none of it happened. A skilled team and skilled players should be able to knowledgeably allow their team to stack and stack and stack. Now this made things very difficult from a balancing standpoint, because either your team was doing it and you were cooking, but if your team wasn't doing these things, you were having a hard time killing bosses, and that could be very tough. I won't disagree with that, but I will say I enjoyed the complexity of damage stacking and debuff stacking way more than the simplicity of well and div, and I would prefer to have that back if possible. With some balancing changes would be really, really nice from a skilled player experience and standpoint. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, first off, I appreciate you more than you probably realize. It took me a while to make a long list, cut out ones that I think wasn't necessary and add ones that I felt were necessary to at least speak on. Some of these were ones that have been ranted on a lot of my streams, so I felt it was necessary to add these as well. If there were others that you wish had been added to this list, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If there were ones that you agreed or disagreed with, I totally understand. Let me know about those as well. Of course, as always, keep it cordial, but just know that I appreciate any criticism or feedback on this list. Of course, this is not comprehensive. These are just ones that I want to just add for Cosmo to see. If you enjoyed the video, a positive rating would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.